Hi, Jason.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. Well, how about you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, so I'm Jason Wood, and right now I'm living in Denver, Colorado, here in the States, and I just love getting outside and exploring nature and playing tennis and just living a pretty active lifestyle. And I also am on this mission now to break the stigma around mental health and to share my story. So I published a book a little earlier this year. I started a blog, and that keeps me very busy. It keeps me definitely interacting with folks from all over the world, trying to share my story and change that narrative.
That's so cool. And what has your journey with mental health been like?
Yeah, so it started all the way back to childhood. I can trace the roots, but in 2020, I was diagnosed with an unspecified eating disorder, and anxiety, and OCD. And at that point, I was at my lowest mentally, physically, and emotionally. And the last 2 years now have been all about this recovery process. And through recovery, I've been able to realize that there were so many different contributing factors that went into my mental health, starting back from being bullied in school or being made fun of because of my weight, to the loss of my parents at a young age and the suppressed pain that I dealt with and the trauma that I experienced. And all of those different factors kind of played a role in the development of my eating disorder, which I would later identify as orthorexia, which is essentially an addiction or an obsession with healthy, clean eating, in addition then to the anxiety disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder that I face. So um, through recovery, I realized the need to get out there and to start sharing my story, because at the start of it, I felt so alone. I felt like I was kind of on an island because a lot of guys aren't talking about it. A lot of individuals aren't talking about orthorexia, and I needed to get out there and to change that narrative.
That's so awesome. I
Mhm.
mean, like as you said at the end there, that there's a lot of stigma kind of surrounding orthorexia and men's eating disorders. I mean, even just men's mental health in general. And it's tough because a lot of times people do feel alone. They feel like they're going through this and there's no one else there that has gone through it or is there for them. Um, but there's so many people that are going through the same thing. I mean, I've
Mhm.
had people reach out to me. I'm sure you've had so many people contact you and say that they can relate to a lot of what you're sharing. And there's lots of people out there. It's just there's this stigma around speaking up about it. So I think it's great that you're doing this and speaking up and sharing your story.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. There's so much. I say that there's like our superpower is storytelling, because we've all overcome something to get to where we're at today. And I think the more of us that share our stories, the more we can connect to each other and the less we'll all feel alone.
Absolutely. Now, how did those around you, maybe family, friends, coworkers, how did they kind of influence your mental health?
Yeah, so it was interesting because I think because of that stigma, I kept so much of it to myself.
Mhm.
So unfortunately, as I was going through my battle, a lot of the people who were closest to me had no idea what I was actually going through, because I lived behind this mask and I was acting like everything was fine when it wasn't. But so unfortunately, I didn't really let a lot of them in. They kind of took the brunt of it. I think about how for a while there I was becoming a very negative, aggressive person because of this mask that I was wearing. And I would take it out on those who were closest to me, my friends, my husband, all of those people kind of in my inner circle were seeing my personality begin to change. And it would eventually be a conversation that I'd have with my husband that would open my eyes to what I was going through, to the problems there with my mental health. And he expressed his concern not only about the way that I was eating, but also about those changes that he was seeing in me personally, that suppressed pain that he could tell was going on inside, my need for control, and just the anxiety that I was dealing with. And it was that conversation that started this road to healing, that started this road to recovery. And actually, one of the scariest things I've had to do in recovery then was open up to those people around me, to my friends and to my
Mhm.
family, because I thought they'd see me as a liar or a fraud because I had been battling all of these things for so long in silence. And it was very, very scary to tell them, but they were extremely supportive of me. In fact, I had one friend that once I told her about my eating disorder, she started sharing her own battle with an eating disorder with
Mhm.
me. And it turns out we'd both been battling in silence for years. So it's incredible how I was never really alone, but that entire time I thought I was.
Yeah, I know. One of the hardest things is speaking up and sharing, especially with those who are close to you. As I think
Mhm,
a lot of the times we're afraid how they're gonna react, how if they'll treat us differently, what they'll think about how we've been acting. But a lot of the times, like your friends, your family, they just want to support you. They're there for you through the highs and the lows. They want to help you through these tough times. And
mhm,
as you said, like if you share something with them, maybe they'll then feel comfortable sharing something with you.
yeah.
And it just like builds this trust. But I mean, they wanna be there for you. So reach out. It's tough. I know it's easier said than done to just share with others, but it's worth it. It can be scary, but it is definitely worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One of the pieces of advice that I have is to tell yourself your story first. And that's
Mhm.
how it helped me share my story. My therapist actually encouraged me to write my story out. So that's what I did. I wrote it out. And then as I was reading it back to myself, I started to gain self-compassion for myself and I started to understand what I was actually going through a little bit better. And that made it easier for me to share it with others. So I always tell people that their most important audience is themselves. So tell yourself first, and then that might make it a little easier to tell those people that are closest to you.
That's a really neat idea. I like that. And I guess my next question is a bit of a tough one, but what would you say your biggest struggle has been?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
Mhm.
So I would say being able to embrace the process because there are so many different little struggles that come up along the way that it can get discouraging at times because it's like one day I'll wake up and I feel like I'm free of the eating disorder or I'm conquered the anxiety and the OCD. And then all of a sudden something will happen that evening or the next day. And I feel like I'm back at square one again. So it's one of those things where I've had to be patient and I've had to embrace the process, and that doesn't always come easy for me. I'm a very impatient person. I want results right away. I want to right away. I'm a fixer by nature. And I've had to remind myself that recovery is not linear, that there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs along the way. And I try to look at every day now as either being a good day or a learning day. There are no bad days. It's just the good or learning days. So I would say that's been the biggest struggle is just, strapping in for the long run because it's almost like you're on a roller coaster and there's no getting off of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, eating disorders and some people have talked about addictions, like there will be days where you feel like you make progress, and there will be days where like you relapse or you move backwards, and it's so easy to just get discouraged or be down on yourself. But you have to look at the whole picture, look at how far you've come, the progress you have made. Take There's always takeaways from each day, like you said, there's no bad days. There's just lots of learning, and there are good days too.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, it's so often that you're not alone in the whole impatient thing because I know a lot of people, like myself included, we wish it could just be like a one day fix, snap my
Yeah.
fingers or change my mind. Okay, I'm gonna fix this now. Okay, like I'm gonna work on my mental health. I'm just not gonna be depressed, anxious, whatever. Okay, but it's unfortunately not that easy. It is tough. does take a while. Um, but as you said, just be patient and, enjoy the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, which is it's funny, I have this shirt on right now. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's like the
Yeah.
perfect shirt for what we're talking about right now. And it reminds me that, it is a journey. It's not necessarily a destination, but it's a journey. So
For sure.
yeah.
Now, what tools and strategies would you say have helped you kind of cope and manage your mental health?
Yeah, so one of the first things is mindfulness. And I know that there's probably a lot of people out there that immediately think of like yoga and meditation, right? And they're like, that's not for me. That's never going to work. And I was in that same boat. When my therapist first mentioned mindfulness to me, I kind of rolled my eyes and I was like, this is never going to work for me. And he taught me that, there's different activities we can do to kind of take that pause that we need. And it doesn't necessarily have to be twisting your body in weird directions or even necessarily focusing on your breath, but things such as reading or writing. I keep a journal, and that is really helpful for me. And I've realized that mindfulness can really be any type of opportunity we use to express ourselves. So if somebody's into dancing, or even when I'm playing tennis or I'm climbing, those are forms of mindfulness for me because it's allowing me to kind of block out everything else and just focus on that one moment, to focus on that task at hand. And that's been incredibly valuable for my mental health. So I encourage everybody to find something that they're passionate about and try to use that as a form of mindfulness because I think it's been extremely helpful for me. And kind of that other thing that's been really big for me is reading other people's stories. We were talking earlier about the power of storytelling, and it's incredible how much strength I'm able to draw from hearing other people's experiences, even if they went through something completely different than what I experienced. It helps me understand bits and pieces of my own journey a little bit better. And again, it helps me with that mental health and just kind of take a moment to pause and reflect on this journey that I'm on.
Absolutely. I know there have been a couple times where I've been like scrolling Instagram and I've come across like someone's post and I've started reading it and found myself going, "Hey, I can kind of relate to that," or "Wait a minute, that like puts into words exactly like how I've been feeling." So sometimes I can't quite even haven't even identified it in myself yet, but then seeing it worded maybe a bit differently by someone else kind of helps me go, "Oh, that makes sense."
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing kind of what that third party point of view can really help us with sometimes.
hmm And I mean, as you said, again, just like sharing your story, especially on a topic that there is so much stigma around, unfortunately, it
Yeah.
just helps to kind of break that barrier. And then the more people that get talking and sharing their stories, it kind of just people are going full circle. They're more likely to share their story, which then helps others, and it just keeps on going around.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, well, we're almost finished here, but in closing, I was wondering if you had any words of advice that you'd want to share with someone who's currently struggling with their mental health.
Yeah, so one of the first things that I would encourage everybody is to remember that they are enough and that they are worthy of help. That it's okay to not be okay. And those might sound cliche, and I know it gets thrown out there a lot, but I think it's so important that we all realize that we're worthy of help because at the start of my journey, I didn't think I was. I didn't think I was sick enough, or I didn't think this could happen to guys. And it was so important for me to understand that I needed to stop comparing myself to others and just look at myself and what I was actually experiencing at this time. So there's no such thing as not being sick enough or not being hurt enough or any of that. If you're experiencing any type of pain or insecurity or anxiety, talk to someone about it. There's always going to be someone out there to listen. I'll listen if you if you need to reach out, reach out to me. But there's always someone there, so you're never alone. So I think more than advice, it's just those reminders that we often forget about, especially as we're facing the storms that we all go through in our lives.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that some of those sayings such as like you are enough, you're not alone, all of that. We hear it so much and see it plastered on posters and little mantras and quotes everywhere, but sometimes we don't quite apply it to ourselves and let it sink in and actually believe it. That you are enough, and your point about thinking that you're not sick enough or hurting enough. I mean, I know there's lots of people out there who will see other people with maybe mental health disorders, eating disorders, and they'd be like, "Well, I'm not that. Like, I'm not that bad, or like I'm not, my eating disorder isn't that bad. I mean, I'm not that depressed. I'm like, I'm fine."
Hmm.
But it's not you like as you said, you can't compare yourself to others. It's not even like these disorders aren't a one size fits all. And just because you're not, say, severely depressed, that doesn't mean you can't be slightly depressed or suffer from something else. And you can still be struggling and you can still ask for help, even if you don't feel like you're going through the same thing as someone else. Everyone, as you said, everyone has a story, but everyone's journey is different.
Hmm.
None of them are straight lines, they're all
Nope.
wavy lines, but they're all completely unique from each other.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think that's the one thing we do all share. Our journeys may be different, but the way our journeys look pretty similar with the ups and downs along the way.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, that's it for today, but thank you so much for coming on here and taking the time out of your day to speak with me today.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having these conversations because these are the conversations that we need to have. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too.